7 verses because I didn't really want to take too long tonight. And I thought, should be a whip right through 7 verses in no time. Man, I'm telling you, we might still get through it pretty quick. We'll see what happens. But we're in chapter 36, and we're finishing up verse 27 to verse 33. And this is where the thing in the book of Job, there's a lot of science talked about, a lot of scientific things that are discussed from this point on, and a lot of it's in the form of a question, but here Elihu is giving us 7 verses. There is some practical application, there's some basic scientific application, but then there's a deeper application of this thing that we'll see toward the end. But first, let's just go ahead and read in verse 27 to 33. It says, "For he maketh small the drops of water, they pour down rain according to the vapor thereof, which the clouds do drop and distill upon man abundantly. Also, can any understand the spreading of the clouds, or the noise of his tabernacle? Behold, he spreadeth his light upon it, and covereth the bottom of the sea. For by them judgeth he the people, he giveth meat in abundance. With clouds he covereth the light, and commandeth it not to shine by the cloud that cometh betwixt. The noise thereof showeth concerning it, the cattle also concerning the vapor." So I'm not going to tell you I understand everything about this, and some of it is just probably my opinion on it. But the first 2 verses are pretty simple, but considering that it was written in around 1800 BC, he's already telling you how rain is formed, because that's what he's talking about. It's how rain is made. And, I don't know if they understood that in 18... I know the American Indian wasn't so sure how that... he's dancing around trying to get things to happen with rain dances. But it says, he maketh small the drops of water, they pour down rain according to the vapor thereof, which the clouds do drop and distill upon man. So, we understand this as evaporation, condensation. This is... Science 101 now. I think most weathermen understand that, or they should. But considering a wind, the other thing is he mentions the word distill. And I don't know if you know it or not, but rainwater is distilled water. Now, as it's coming down, it can pick up particles and dust and things like that. But relatively, when it gets to the ground, it's distilled water. It's not till it gets into the bedrock or in the ground or running through limestone or whatever kind of stone there is, it picks up the hardness. It picks up your magnesium, your calcium, calcium chloride, magnesium chloride, things like that, sodium chloride. And that's what picks up your hardness that you have to take out with your softener. But rainwater itself is soft. So if you had a cistern and you were pulling the water from your roof, you'd find out that water's fairly soft. I mean, it's not going to be perfectly soft, but it's going to be fairly soft. So when that water evaporates, even off the ocean, it's a good thing it doesn't bring the salt with it, or we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we? Talk about some salty rain. That's what we'd have. So that's what he's mentioning there. He said, which the clouds do drop and distill upon man abundantly. Also, in verse 29 and 30, also, can any understand the spreadings of the clouds, or the noise of his tabernacle? Behold, he spreadeth his light upon it, and covereth the bottom of the sea. Now, that first verse, you could just apply that to cloud formations, stratus, cumulus, nimbus, cirrus. I think those are the different types of clouds. You got a stratocumulus, or you can have a stratonimbus. It's just different cloud layers and different forms of layers, and thunderclouds and things like that. I love storms, so when they talked about clouds, I tried to pay attention in science class, and I was like, oh, that's a nimbostratus right there, or that's a nimbocumulus thundercloud. you got to act like you're smart. And Emily will know. She's probably going, no, he's got that wrong. He's got that wrong. I know he does. So, but anyway, the spreadings of the clouds. Who can understand it? Weathermen, they see what's coming, but how all that stuff forms. God is the one that directs weather. Now, when it's just about upon you, they can tell you, well, there's a storm that's going to hit because we can see it coming. But they don't know where the northeastern or all these different things, what do they call them things? When it changes the jet stream, and El Ninos, I mean, all that kind, and I don't understand none of that stuff, but, years of that. But they get fairly close, but they still can't half the time predict the weather. And we call them prognosticators. What Jesus said was you can discern the face of the sky, but you can't discern the times or the signs of the times. So, they can tell you what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, but of course he said when it's red and lowering, okay? Or if you see that in the evening, I think it's good weather, isn't it? If you see it in the morning, it's traveling. Yeah, it's probably means bad weather. And how's it go? Red in the morning, huh? Red in the morning, sailor take warning. Okay. We probably got it. No, it's probably right. But we see there's going to be a much deeper application of what this book is about. And when he mentions the word tabernacle, the noise of his tabernacle, the tabernacle, the one that they construct in the Old Testament, pictures the universe. You can see that in Hebrews chapter 8 and Hebrews chapter 9. It's probably laid out like our universe is, where God is, but then there's a division between God and the universe. And so that tabernacle is going to picture that. The noise, we're going to see that noise is more connected with God than it is thunder, okay, real thunder that we hear today. So the other thing is when he mentions clouds there, the spreadings of the clouds, I don't know if you've seen the latest pictures from the Hubble telescope, but they show these huge clouds in outer space. Huge clouds. Now, they may not be a vapor cloud, but they could be a vapor. Could be a chemical vapor. It could be dust. Dust clouds. They say they know what they are. I'm not sure they know anything, but they show these incredible clouds that are in space. So we don't necessarily can apply it to just above our head. It could be far above our head. We know that if the universe is God's tabernacle, well, this is a part of it, I guess. And he mentions the sea, okay? Where did he mention the sea? Verse 30. Behold, he spreadeth his light upon it and covereth the bottom of the sea. Now, this kind of threw me, and Dr. Ruckman tried to explain it, and that went completely over my head. I never got a word of it. I read it like 3 times. I still couldn't get it. But the sea can refer to something that is above our heads. Job 41:31 says, he maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. Now, we know that this is Leviathan that is swimming around in the great deep above our heads. He's a 7-headed, fire-breathing, aquatic dragon. And it is Satan. Okay? And he is swimming around in that great deep. So when the Bible mentions the sea, you can't just say that it automatically has to be the Red Sea or the seas that we have here on this earth. It can refer to the great deep above our heads. Now, how many of you understood that? There's water above our heads. Okay, that's in Genesis chapter 1. In Revelation 21, verse 1, he said, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. You say, well, why is that up there? Because it's a buffer between the universe and God. If that body of water did not exist, the whole universe would explode into flames. It would just disintegrate. Why? Our God is a consuming fire. He said the heavens are not clean in His sight. Heavens plural. 3 heavens. 2 of them are not clean. The prince of the power of the air. And he said that thing that's above there, out there, no stars, there's something out there. It's unclean in God's sight. 2 Peter chapter 3, we know that God is He's going to melt the elements with a fervent heat. The heavens are He's going to fold the whole thing up like a garment. It's going to disintegrate. So when he mentions the sea there, it talks about he spread his light upon it, covereth the bottom of the sea. Well, okay, it could be that sea up there. In Genesis 1, verse 1 and 2, he said, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Well, why wasn't darkness upon the face of the earth? Because 2 Peter 3 tells you the earth is under the water. It has been destroyed. It is without form and void. Now, I know a lot of folks don't agree with that and don't believe that, but something happened. You're not going to tell me. It even tells us that in Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, we know that Lucifer had a throne. And we know that that throne was somewhere. Well, it wasn't in a tree, okay? He had a throne on this earth. The Bible says that thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Not just as a serpent, but as a cherubim ruling. And he fell. And when he fell, man, God scrapped the thing and drowned that earth under that water. And it was underneath that body of water. So that makes that body of water, it makes the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, it makes them like a drop of water in comparison. This body of water is so big you can submerge the earth and probably a lot of other planets with it, probably the whole solar system. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. We call these the great deeps. Okay? So I'm just saying that the application of this verse could be referring to the great deeps. Then it mentions His light. His light. Verse 30. Behold, He spreadeth His light upon it. This could be God's light, the glory that He gives off Himself. Doesn't have to be the sun. We can apply it to sunlight, but we could also apply it to God's light. And think about it. If He's talking about the sea, talking about the deep, the bottom of the deep is over our heads. And if He comes through that deep, which we know He does at the Advent, but also He's going to have to come through that deep if He's going to get somebody out. And you know what's going to be lit up? Well, we're going to find out that that people on the ground are not going to see Him, but that light's going to go, it's going to be awful bright, man. I mean, it could light up the bottom of the deep, I guess. You know, John 1:5 says, the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And probably the sign of His coming may be the fact that it's a light, because there's going to be some darkness going on. But look what He says here in verse 31 to 33. Now, we're going to end up going right back through this again the second time and applying it prophetically and in the Great Tribulation. He says in verse 31, for by them, and I think He's referring to the clouds, for by them judgeth He the people, and giveth meat in abundance. With clouds He covereth the light, and commandeth it not to shine by the cloud that cometh betwixt. The noise thereof showeth concerning it. And again, I believe He's referring to the cloud, because He says the cattle also concerning the vapor. Okay? So what does that mean? And when you first read it, you're like, I have no idea what that means. But some things kind of jump out. One of the things is, when we're talking about, you know, everything puts off a frequency. Even planets put off different frequencies. Stars put off frequencies. White noise coming from outer space. There's a lot of noise coming out of God's tabernacle. And we try to hone in on that. That's why, well, you know, when SETI and all that, when they're looking for something, it's not that they don't pick up radio frequency, they pick up all kinds of white noise. They're looking for something that's intelligible, that's got design to it or repetition to it. And they've been waiting a long time. They're going to get it. I told y'all, if you ever hear on the news, you know, where they have this, they break in, you know, to your favorite sitcom or whatever. They break in, they say, we've just received, the SETI has just received a radio transmission that they have verified it's from outer space and it's intelligent. And I'll go, it's about time. Okay, because as soon as they come, I know this, when they come down, I'm going up. And what's coming down ain't good. But he says there, the them of verse 31 is the clouds, and there's judgment connected with clouds in the Bible. The flood, I'm sure that involves some clouds. The tabernacle, it had a cloud that stayed over top of it. the giving of the law. When Moses went up into the mount, he dealt with clouds up there. The ascension of Christ, he was received up in a cloud. The second advent, definitely, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him. So there's no doubt, and probably no doubt that there were clouds involved in the crucifixion. You've got 3 hours of darkness. Now, how God did that, I don't know. That's up to him. But it probably involved clouds, because clouds, God can judge the world by clouds. Because if he does away with them for about 6 months, you'll be begging for him, right? In the millennium, that's how he judges this world. If they don't come up once a year at the time of tabernacles to come and worship before the king, he cuts off their rain. And then if they don't come, he plagues them. You say, who would be that stupid? They're here. There's stupid always existed. It's still going to be here even in the millennium, where folks are going to, here you've got the Lord Jesus Christ sitting on the throne at Jerusalem, and they're going to refuse to come up. Craziest thing you ever read in your life. But that's how sinners are. That even under the best conditions, man will rebel because of a sin nature. That's why he needs to be born again. Okay, verse 32 there. So you have this light that's behind the clouds, and the light is concealed. Something is concealed so that you can't see it on the other side of the cloud. Since he uses vapor in verse 33, the thundering, of course, coming from the clouds and everything, or from behind the clouds, all depends how you want to look at it. The cloud hides the light, but the noise betrays the presence behind the clouds. Because it says, the noise thereof showeth concerning it. And it's the clouds. So the way it's worded in a lot of your Bible is, it's almost poetic. And Job is no different. And you're looking at somebody, believe it or not, I majored in English in high school. They should have failed me for sure. I should have never made it through high school. I don't know how I did, but I did. But sometimes if you see something different, that's fine, because sometimes I don't see it at all. But here's how the thing's I think is going to apply. Because the book of Job is about 42 months of great tribulation, this pictures a post-tribulation rapture. Now, some of it can apply to our rapture, but we know that this time frame, that 42 chapters, 42 months of great tribulation. Job means one persecuted. You have Leviathan and Behemoth, a beast and a dragon in chapter 40 and 41. There's no doubt about the book of Job and the time frame, and we're getting late. We're in chapter 36. And you know what's just toward the end of the Great Tribulation? A post-tribulation rapture. Not our rapture, we're already gone. But it's tribulation saints. We're talking about those beheaded for the witness of Jesus Christ, those who refuse the mark of the beast. And they're coming up. So now, let's take another look at it with that in mind. Look at verse 27 and 28. For he maketh small the drops of water, they pour down rain according to the vapor thereof, which the clouds do drop and distill upon man abundantly. Abundant rainfall. You mean like the early and latter rains? Do you know that Israel is promised, and I don't believe this is worldwide because there's a worldwide drought for 42 months. And it lasts 42 months, but Israel. You notice when Moses was plaguing Egypt, over in Goshen, they weren't being plagued. It looks like God says, I'm going to dump the early and the latter rains on you in 1 month. And he's going to cause everything to grow over there. That's the reason why they're going to try to go over there to get their needs met, because the rest I finally figured out why they're actually sacrificing saints on an altar and they're eating them. And now I know why. There's nothing else left to eat. They've turned to cannibalism. They're drinking the blood, they're eating the flesh, and these are the saints that are being sacrificed on an altar. They're doing it in a religious type ceremony. You say that couldn't happen. You wait. The Bible's never wrong. But I'll tell you, after 3.5 years of a worldwide drought, A lot people have turned. I mean, you can't even imagine a 3.5-year drought worldwide. Man, if we go 6 weeks without rain here, we're crying the blues. You know, nothing's growing. It's like a dust bowl out there. Can you imagine 3.5 years what it would be like? There would be no water. There'd be no food. It would be very tough finding anything. I mean, we're talking aquifers would dry up. Anyway, let me get back to what I was talking about. So what happens is, right toward close to the end, the early and the latter rains take place. And it looks like, with all those clouds and all that rain, there's going to be a post-trib rapture at that same time. All right, let's look at some of the verses. James 5:7 says, "Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord." Context, second advent. "Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain." Now, your charismatics, of course, apply this that the early and latter rain is some type of outpouring of the Spirit. It's rain. That's the context. It's rain, and it's going to bring forth fruit from the earth. So we're going to find it in all the books that deal with the second advent, or at least we're going to find it many times. Guess what? It's even in Job. I don't even remember going over it. We probably did, but I don't remember. And it was in chapter 29. Job 29:23. "And they waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouth wide as for the latter rain." There it is. Job 29:23. And here's Jeremiah 5:24. "Neither say they in their heart, let us now fear the Lord our God, that giveth rain, both the former and the latter in his season. He reserveth unto us the appointed weeks of the harvest." Now what it boils down to is you got this former and latter rain, and they usually don't come all at the same time. But because there's a 3.5-year drought and the ground is parched, God's going to bring the former and the latter rain, especially in the land of Israel. He's going to bring it. I don't think it's going to be anywhere else. It doesn't look like it is. But he's going to bring the rain that is promised to him, the former and the latter, in 1 month. In fact, here, we're coming up on the verse. Hosea 6:3. Let me read this one. It says, "Then shall we know, if we follow on to know the Lord, his going forth is prepared as the morning," there's the watch, "and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth." Joel 2:23. These are all second advent passages. "Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he hath given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month." Now, if he's referring to the first month of Abib or Nisan, whichever one of them is Hebrew, one of them is Persian, from the Persian language, that means they're 7 months away from the Advent. Because the Advent happens in Tishrei, or the 7th month. So that would give time for, a lot of time for all the plants and trees and everything to recover from a drought in the land of Palestine. In other words, God's trying to bless them, and then at the same time, he uses this the devil tries to use this to be a judgment against Israel. Anyway, Zechariah 10:1 says, "Ask ye of the Lord rain in the time of the latter rain, so the Lord shall make bright clouds." You know, you've seen bright clouds, haven't you? There'll be rain, and you'll see the sun behind them, and there's these bright clouds. They got a silver lining and all that. Well, it might not be the sun behind it necessarily. Well, it might be the sun, just the S-O-N. It says, "Give them showers of rain to every one grass in the field." So it's going to rejuvenate at least a good portion of Palestine, where the Jews are, or where the Jews are going to be. And then you have in verse 29, and let me turn over there. Verse 29, it says, "Also, can any understand the spreading of the clouds and the noise of his tabernacle? Behold, he spreadeth his light upon it and covereth the bottom of the sea." Let me see here. There's a concealment when you have the post-trib rapture, you have a concealment of the bridegroom. And the bridegroom is behind the clouds, and he's calling away those virgins that are ready. He's calling them away. Now, I'm going to probably contradict myself here. He calls them away to a wedding. Okay? When you have a wedding, you have the bride with one side, and you know what she has behind her? She has her maidens. Right? They're not going to be married. They're going to witness a wedding or witness a marriage. And when we're talking about those Jews that are in the tribulation that are raptured up, they're raptured up toward the end, close to the end, and they're up there to witness a marriage. When you and I get there, we have to go through the judgment seat of Christ first, and then there's a marriage. Now, don't get that confused with the marriage supper. The marriage supper is on the ground. And I don't know everything about that. I don't profess to know everything about that. Anyway, 2 Samuel 22:14, and this is about the Lord's voice. It said, the Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice. So when God talks, I believe there's a New Testament verse that says they say it thundered, or they heard thunder. Okay? They don't necessarily hear the words. Believers hear the words. Unsaved people just hear thunder. Job 37:2, it says, hear attentively the noise of his voice. Remember talking about the noise of his tabernacle? Hear attentively the noise of his voice and the sound that goeth out of his mouth. He's saying something. We know that there are 3 times in the Bible, there's one phrase that shows up 3 times, and there are 3 parts to the first resurrection. Blessed is he that hath part in the first resurrection. There are 3 parts to it. One part has already happened when the saints came up when Christ arose. Another part's going to be the rapture of the church, and the last part will be the post-trib rapture. On that first resurrection, it says the second death hath no power. Talking about hell, the lake of fire. It can't hurt us. It can't hurt anybody that came up with Christ, and it can't hurt anybody that came up with the tribulation. Second death is off the table. Okay? 3 times the phrase is used, come up hither. Exactly that phrase 3 times in your Bible. Once in Proverbs, twice in the book of Revelation. One of them in reference to John, where he says to John, come up hither, and John's the type of the church. His name means beloved. And he is that disciple whom Jesus loved. Says it 5 times about John in the Gospel of John. John is that one that witnesses Christ coming. We are here. We will witness his coming to get us. That's our second coming, is the rapture. So John is a picture and a type of that. And then you have another come up hither, Revelation chapter, I want to say 11 or 12, where he's talking about the post-trib rapture and the rapture of tribulation saints. 11 verse 12. So Job 37:2 says, hear attentively the noise of his voice and the sound that goeth out of his mouth. Job 37:4 says, after it a voice roareth. He thundereth with the voice of his excellency, and he will not stay them when his voice is heard. Oh. In other words, when he says something, somebody's moving out. When he says, come up hither, boy, they're coming. Job 37:5, God thundereth marvelously with his voice. Great things doeth he, which we cannot comprehend. Psalm 18, verse 13, the Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave his voice, hailstones and coals of fire. It might be accompanied by a plague. Remember, those hailstones are something that came down in Moses' day, and fire is a result of that hail. I guess if something... If you super cool something, I think it could almost... I saw a video one time, and they were trying to scare us, and they did. Don't ever set off explosives when it's snowing, if there's snow on the ground. They show this guy, he's walking toward, they set up this detonation. It was, he was a professional, whatever, and he's walking through the snow, crunch, 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 crunch. And he walks over to it, and the next thing you know, he's just gone. Explosion takes place, and it was the static electricity that literally just blew him up. He was gone, vaporized. I mean, it was that big of an explosion. And when ice is super cooled, and it comes down, I mean, it can literally have such static electricity, it cause fires. It could have lightning coming off of it. It could have charges coming off of it. And it may be that's what, when he says hailstones and coals of fire. I don't know if you know it or not, but you get down to something that's super cold, it'll burn you. I mean, go ahead and stick your tongue on that pole, and you'll get a burn from it. What's that? Liquid nitrogen. They use that to take care of warts and stuff like that, man. I had them all over my hands at one time. I went to this guy, and he's just taking that, he'd dip it in that, and he'd press down, and I had about 15 of them on both hands. I walked out there, and I nearly started crying. I was hurting so bad. And that guy, he enjoyed it. Some kind of sadist. I don't know what he was, man, but he enjoyed burning them things off of me. And here it was something cold. Okay. Anyway, Matthew 25:10. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came. And they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Now, here's where my contradiction comes in. Dr. Ruckman says the wedding's already taken place. Okay. There's a reason why they're going up. Okay. It's toward the end. Remember, those that remain, the 5 foolish virgins, it says, and he that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved. These are taken out before the end. And there's a reason why they're taken out. They're taken up to heaven for a purpose. But it says, when he will return, they were ready when went in with him to the marriage. Okay, now here's the other verse in Luke 12, verse 35 and 36. Let your loins be girded about, your lights burning. There's the lights. And ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord when he will return from the wedding. So I don't know. That when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately. So, you say, is the wedding past or is it not past? I don't know. But maybe they're there to witness whatever after it's happened. They're there as a witness. Psalm 94, verse 4 and 5, it says, now notice this, their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom. Remember we talked about the sun behind the clouds? Well, the sun is a type of Christ. That is a bridegroom. And it says, which is a bridegroom coming out of his chamber and goeth and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. So, even in our rapture, the Bible says we meet the Lord in the air. I mean, and so shall we ever be the Lord. But I think, does it mention clouds? Okay. The Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Called up together to meet him in the clouds. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Okay, to meet him in the air. There's something clouds in there, isn't there? 1 Thessalonians 4. It's either there or it's in 1 Corinthians. Something, I know it. There's a verse that says in the clouds, right? Does?
Together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air.
Okay, it says in both of them, okay. There's going to be clouds. Why? Because the world is not going to be able to witness what's happening. They're not going to see the Lord. They're not going to see, well, we're going to go up so quick, they're probably not going to see that either. They're just going to see we vanished and we're gone. And we're going to meet the Lord in the air, in the clouds. And those post-tribulation saints are going to do the same. Although they may not see the Lord, but I think they'll see them ascend. Because at the same time, Moses and Elijah, the two witnesses in the book of Revelation, they watched their heads pop back on because they beheaded them. And they watch him stand up and then ascend, just as they watched Jesus Christ ascend. So ours will be a real quick one. Nobody gets, we're just gone. But for the trib saints, the Lord kind of takes his time, says, we're just going to do a slow rapture here. Just come on up. Everybody gets to watch them. At least they watch Moses and Elijah, because it says they watched them ascend. Us, in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye at the last trump. Boom. So they're not identical. So folks that try to tell you that the rapture of 1 Thessalonians 4 is the tribulation rapture is nonsense. Nonsense. There's no reason for the church to be in the tribulation. It's even a different message. So anyway, so he mentions there that the tabernacle for the Son, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Verse 30 and 31, these clouds, I don't necessarily know that they're supernatural, but they're concealing the glory of God. Man, some thick cloud cover. And I imagine since these folks are coming from, he's not only just rapturing out Jews that have been beheaded for the witness of Christ or resurrecting them, but there's going to be plenty of Gentiles from every tribe and nation and tongue and language, whatever. So I imagine it's worldwide cover, worldwide cloud cover. I don't know if we've ever seen that, to have, or at least over all the land masses, or over all the major population areas. But they're going to conceal the glory of God. Let's see. The reason the clouds are, and let me look at the verse again here. I'm running back. Verse 31 is what I'm looking at. Yeah, for by them he judgeth the people, he giveth meat in abundance. Well, when you've had 3.5 years drought, there's a blessing when God brings the former and latter rain, because the crops are going to grow. And meat, by the way, is any kind of food in Scripture. I mean, it can refer to any kind of food. Usually in the context, you can tell whether he's talking about meat from a cow or a lamb or a goat versus any meat. He says, have ye any meat? They gave him honeycomb and fish. Well, that's the definition of meat. So he talks, again, James 5:7, it says, be patient therefore, brethren, to the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it until he receive the early and latter rain. So they're waiting for the food supplies to come back to grow. So verse 32 and 33, and where am I at here? With clouds he covereth the light, and commandeth it not to shine by the cloud that cometh betwixt. The noise thereof showeth concerning it the cattle also concerning the vapor. I didn't even read his passage here. You see, what's being concealed? Well, a UFO is being concealed. An unidentified flying object. Jesus said, he says, I'm not of this world. I mean, he flat out said that. I'm not of this world. I mean, he was, in every definition of the world, he was an alien. And when he comes back, he's a UFO. He's an unidentified flying object that's being covered by the clouds. You notice these UFOs, they always go for cloud cover too. There's something about the principalities and powers in high places. And it may be that has something to do with that. Let's see here. So there's a blessing, but there are also judgment, or clouds are connected with judgment, and at the same time, God is blessing one portion of the earth. There's a judgment coming with it. In Joel 2:3, here's the blessing. A fire, well, this is second advent, a fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. But look what it says about the land. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Well, that tells you that when it comes back at the Advent, everything has grown back, and it's grown back lush. Because it couldn't have been that way if there was a drought going on for that period of time. So that former and latter rain has refreshed that area that he's coming back to, which would be Palestine and the Sinai desert in that area. He says, behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them. But at the same time, here's the judgment. It says, and after, this is Daniel 9:26, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. You got to have water to have a flood. And it says this in Revelation 12:15, and the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman. That would be Israel. That he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And it's an interesting verse. I believe it's in Job. We're going to cover it. Talk about Leviathan, that he thinketh he can swallow up Jordan. He thinks the way that book is laid out, but somebody's being chased with a flood, and then, well, of course, it's Israel, and then it says the earth opens her mouth and swallows the flood. So at the same time, all this water is coming down and restoring the land. Somebody's using that water to try to attack Israel, or as a judgment against Israel. Okay. That's all I have. Actually, we probably could have spent another 2 weeks on that. I was going to look at his. Yeah, he's pretty much saying the same thing here in his. And this is the light one. We got some stuff coming up that's going to be heavy into the science. I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm very dependent on Dr. Ruckman to help out. Oh, that's all right. So. When it sounded like a hoedown going, do-side-do, and then you want to take the thing and just break it. Yeah. All right, any questions about what we covered, or maybe you saw something I didn't see? Yeah.